Get Get ready for an enigma that will leave you frozen, really. Imagine a town where people, just like that, fall into a deep sleep for days. Whole days. No, it's not a horror movie. This really happened in Kalachi, a small town in Kazakhstan. Since 2000 days, no less. The most chilling thing about all this, apart from sleeping for days, are the symptoms. Hallucinations, disorientation, even paralysis. They have a hard time talking. As if they were trapped in a nightmare. And the worst thing, when they wake up they don't remember anything. It's as if those days had disappeared from their minds. More than 100 people suffered this evil. Children, adults, for 3 years, some several times. Others, luckily, seemed immune. A total mystery. At first, of course, all kinds of causes were considered. From contaminated lives to encephalopathy. Even collective hysteria. But, as we will see, the truth is much more strange. In this immersion, we are going to listen to those who lived it, the scientists who investigated it, and experts who have studied the case. Together, we will try to unravel this enigma. Well, let's start with the testimonies, with the people who lived this nightmare firsthand. Because their stories give us an idea of the fear and confusion that took over the town. One of those people is Taizia, a resident of Kalachi who suffered the disease up to 3 times. 3 times. And each one with different symptoms and duration. The first, in 2012, she was working when suddenly she felt a very strong dizziness. She got home as she could and fainted. And how long was she asleep? Days. She woke up in the hospital with absolutely no memory. Imagine waking up in a place you don't know, without knowing how you got there, with a void in your memory of whole days. It's terrifying. And the strangest thing, the neighbor who helped her get home. She fell asleep on the way. But let's continue with Taizia. In 2014 she suffered another episode while preparing to go to a concert. Again the dizziness, she fell asleep. And this time it lasted 5 days. And every time she woke up, the same feeling of emptiness, of lost time. As if part of your life had been stolen. In the 3rd episode, Taizia experienced something even stranger. Temporary paralysis. She couldn't move her legs. And although she was not asleep, she walked and talked as if she were anesthetized. And then she remembered something. Nothing. What strikes me most about Taizia is the unpredictability. Of course, it could happen at any time, anywhere. Without warning. Without warning. And she was not the only one in her family. Her partner, while fishing quietly in his boat, also suddenly fell asleep. When he woke up, he didn't remember anything, not even having spoken to her. And his speech was incoherent. Incoherent. It's that these stories make your hair stand on end. More than 100 people affected in 3 years, some several times, others immune. A medical puzzle. And if that were not enough, there was also an affected cat. His name was Marquez. His owner said that before falling into a deep sleep, the cat behaved very strangely. Strange how? Well, I don't know, like disoriented. And then he would fall asleep and, attention, he would snore like a person. He would snore like a person. This is already a horror movie. With all that, some families decided to leave Kalachi out of fear. But others, many others, refused to leave their homes. Convinced that there was no danger. Faced with such a threat, invisible, inexplicable, everyone reacts in a different way. It's normal. Of course. The scientific community, of course, got to work. Thousands of tests were done. In the water, in the soil, in the air, even in the blood, hair, and nails of the neighbors. More than 7,000 tests. A barbarity. They were looking for an explanation for this phenomenon. Radiation, radon gas, heavy metals, bacteria, viruses, anything that could be the cause. They even cut off the gas supply and turned off the phone towers to see if they could find any clues. Like a detective looking for a needle in a haystack. At first, attention was focused on an abandoned uranium mine, 3 kilometers from Kalachi. It was thought that radon gas, a radioactive gas produced by the disintegration of uranium, could be the culprit. A fairly plausible theory, right? Yes, but the radiation levels in the town were normal. And the effects of radon gas on the body were nothing like the symptoms of sleep sickness. So that was ruled out. And the theory of mass hysteria didn't hold up either. No, because it didn't explain the cat thing or people's reluctance to leave the town. Another explanation had to be found. One that would fit all the pieces of the puzzle. And this is where Viktor Kayokov, former director of the mine, comes in. Ah, yes, Viktor Kayokov and his theory. A somewhat peculiar one, but one that ultimately proved to be the key. But that's what I'll tell you in the next part. Last time we were left hanging with Viktor Kayokov and his theory. What was that so peculiar thing that ultimately proved to be the key to the mystery? Well, Kayokov's theory at first seems to have nothing to do with it, but... Well, he said that carbon monoxide was to blame for everything. Carbon monoxide. And what was that doing in an abandoned uranium mine? You see, when they closed the mine in the 90s, they stopped pumping water out of there. And of course, the tunnels and underground galleries gradually became flooded. And the wood that had been used to build the mine, being submerged, began to decompose. Of course, that makes sense. Wood rotting in a closed place with water generates gases. And one of those gases is carbon monoxide. And all that water and those gases accumulated in the mine, imagine, like a giant pressure cooker, began to create enormous pressure. Until it found a weak point and came to the surface. But how did that affect the people of Kalachi? Kayokov thought that carbon monoxide, being lighter than air, rose and seeped through the ground in some areas of the town. And this happened especially in winter and spring. Of course, with the cold, the ground is more compact. Yes, and the temperature difference with the inside of the mine caused the gas to come out with more force. And here comes the important part. Carbon monoxide is an asphyxiating gas. If you breathe it, it displaces the oxygen in your blood and doesn't reach the organs properly, especially the brain. Hence the symptoms, the loss of consciousness, disorientation, problems speaking. The brain without enough oxygen doesn't function properly. And in some cases, exposure to carbon monoxide can be fatal. The question was, could scientists prove that Kayokov's theory was true? And they succeeded. To prove it, they took air samples inside the mine. They wanted to measure the concentration of carbon monoxide. What did they find? The levels of carbon monoxide were extremely high, much more than what is considered safe. And of course, they also saw that oxygen levels were below normal. So, Kayokov's theory was correct. And yes, it's amazing that something so simple, the decomposition of wood in basic physics, was the cause of this whole mystery. Sometimes the simplest explanations are the right ones. It's true. But, if carbon monoxide is so dangerous, why didn't the people of Kalachi smell it? Because it is odorless. It has no smell. They breathed it in without realizing it. Until they started to feel the symptoms. An invisible gas that can leave you unconscious or something worse. The case of Kalachi teaches us many things. For example, that you have to think critically, connect different areas of knowledge. Yes. In this case, chemistry, geology, and medicine were key to solving the mystery. Totally. And is it known why it happened in winter and spring? Well, scientists believe it has to do with the temperature and pressure changes between the inside of the mine and the outside. So, the weather influenced the release of the gas. In winter, with the ground frozen, a kind of plug was formed that prevented the carbon monoxide from escaping. But when spring arrived, with the thaw, all that accumulated pressure was released suddenly. Like when you open a pressure cooker. And that freeze-thaw cycle would explain why sleep sickness in Kalachi was seasonal. It makes sense. In the end, this mystery has taught us that human activity can have unexpected consequences. And that geology and climate play a fundamental role. And this leads us to an important question. Could there be other Kalachis in the world? Other communities that are at risk because of abandoned mines or the release of toxic gases? It is a question that makes you think. We are left with that question in the air, right? Could there be other Kalachis out there? Other communities at risk because of abandoned mines? Well, I'm afraid so. There are thousands of abandoned mines around the world and many are not controlled as they should be. So they could be releasing gases or toxic substances without anyone knowing. Kalachi serves as a warning, an alarm signal. Industrial activity, even if it stops, can have long-term consequences. Totally agree. It is a responsibility, both of companies and governments, to ensure that communities are safe and that the environment is protected. Undoubtedly. We must control those abandoned mines, monitor them to avoid risks and protect people's health. So that there are no more towns that suffer what Kalachi suffered. A town that one day woke up from a deep sleep and found itself with a much more complicated reality. The case of Kalachi reminds us of something very important. Science not only helps us understand the world, but also to protect it. And to protect ourselves. And with this, I think we have reached the end of our immersion in the mystery of Kalachi. A journey through mystery, science, and responsibility. We hope you found it as fascinating as we did. And that it has made you reflect on the importance of knowledge to understand and protect the world in which we live. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, it would help me a lot if you subscribed to the channel and gave it a like. And don't forget to leave a comment. I love reading your opinions and suggestions to continue creating content that